Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Scora. I'm one of four outreach specialists with the University of Wisconsin's Center for Tobacco Research and Intervention. Thank you all for joining us on today's webinar for an update on adolescent tobacco and nicotine product use. Before I introduce our presenter, I do briefly want to review just a few reminders and some housekeeping items for you before we get started. First, with a larger group online with us today, in our best effort to prevent any bandwidth issues and to keep streaming as smooth as possible for everyone, we ask that you please turn off your cameras during the presentation to ensure that we have as much bandwidth as possible. Also, please keep your microphone on mute for the duration of the presentation. Following the presentation, though, you are more than welcome to unmute to ask any questions or provide any comments that you may have if you want to participate in the discussion. During the presentation, you are welcome to submit any questions that you may have using the chat box, and we will be sure to get to those questions at the end of the presentation. At the conclusion of today's live webinar, you will receive a brief evaluation survey about the webinar. It's just a few questions, should hopefully take less than a minute to complete, but this is just valuable to us and we really appreciate any feedback that you have to help us improve our training and resources, as well as identifying any other topic areas of interest for future webinars. Lastly, we are recording this presentation, so you will receive an email following the webinar with a link to the recording, and if there are any other pertinent supporting materials, we'll send those out in that follow-up email as well. This recording will also be posted on our website on our webinars page, along with many of the other archived past webinars that we've done. So we'll share the link to those archived webinars on our website in the chat now, and then we'll also be sending that out in that follow-up email. So now it's time to get to our presenter. Dr. Bran Williams is an assistant professor of internal medicine and pediatrics at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. He works as an adult and pediatric hospitalist at UW Health. Dr. Williams is also active in tobacco control research with a focus on vaping cessation in young people and spends time as a researcher within UW-CTRI, working diligently to keep up with the ever-evolving landscape of tobacco products and trends in tobacco use. We are excited to hear from Dr. Williams today, so without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Brian. You can share your screen.
Great, thank you. All right, does that look okay? All right, so I'm really excited to talk to everyone about adolescent tobacco use. This is an area that has really fascinated me. One thing I love is, or one thing I guess I'm fascinated by, is how much this area is changing. Devices are evolving, use rates are changing, and there's a lot of different factors that are driving some of those changes. So I'm excited to get into it. Before I go any further, I also just want to say a quick thank you to everyone on this call, everyone working in this space. We know the needs of adolescents are many, the needs of young adults are many. So I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone for your work in this public health space. So my goals for today are really to do a quick review on e-cigarettes and concerns with their use. That's not going to be the focus. And then I'm going to jump over to trends in adolescent use and, some of the factors that are impacting rates of use. And one of the most interesting things that's really evolving before our eyes is device evolution and really a lot of the newer smart vapes that we're starting to see on the market, as well as touching on their legal standing. We'll briefly cover nicotine pouches, as those are also definitely on the increase in young people. And then we'll talk and close with some ideas on prevention and treatment strategies. So a very quick summary on how e-cigarettes, or vapes, as they're now really being called by young people, how they work. So all vapes have a battery. That battery heats some sort of a coil. It used to be metal, then Juul introduced a ceramic coil, and now a lot of devices are using a mesh coil. But that mesh coil becomes very hot and it comes in contact with a liquid. That liquid then turns into an aerosol that is inhaled by the user. I think the industry has liked to call this vaping because vaping sounds relatively innocuous. It's the purest form of a liquid when it turns straight into gas. Aerosol is probably a more appropriate term because we know when users inhale from a vape that they're getting fine particles of both solids and liquids deposited into their lungs in addition to just a gas. When I think of, you know, teen use and why I care, I really try and break it down to two buckets to really try and separate these two subjects for parents, for kids, to teachers as we talk about these issues. And the first is the chemicals, the toxins. We know when you inhale from an e-cigarette, you are inhaling small concentrations of carcinogens, heavy metals, ultrafine particles. You know, bad substances that can deposit into your lungs, become absorbed into your body, and cause inflammation in your lungs. The other bucket that I really try and separate and pull out is nicotine. Nicotine is the chemical we're all aware of that causes that little bit of euphoria when you inhale. And it's also the chemical that causes addiction or dependence. And withdrawal from nicotine is what causes cravings and irritability in young people. When we look at the toxins in e-cigarettes, we know there are many. There's been a lot of sort of chemical analyses of the aerosol. We can't really say what the long-term effects of this exposure is. I can't imagine it's a health benefit, but we can't speak as conclusively on e-cigarette long-term consequences like we can in traditional cigarettes. When we compare e-cigarette aerosols to what's inhaled when you use a combusted cigarette, certainly the chemicals, the toxins, the carcinogens are lower, but they're certainly not chemical, toxin, carcinogen free. The other bucket, that bucket of nicotine, is particularly challenging in young people. If anyone is dealing with teenagers at home, we know their brains are still years away from their final form. There's a lot of data now that shows that the prefrontal cortex, which is largely involved in executive functioning, is still developing through age 25. So there's a lot of what we call plasticity in the brain where things can be rewired. We also know in the adolescent brain that the receptor for nicotine, it's the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, it's expressed in higher amounts in the adolescent brain and is more active when it does come in contact with nicotine, providing easier feedback loops. So smaller and less frequent dosing of nicotine can lead to increased rates of dependence in young people. And that brain, as I mentioned, can rewire much easier when it's still developing, as opposed to a brain that's becoming exposed to nicotine at age 30. Those circuits don't form nearly as easily as they do in a brain that is still developing. There's data that nicotine exposure in adolescents can lead to both cognitive and behavioral effects. You know, mood disorders certainly can go along with dependence or withdrawal, and then difficulty with attention. In addition, we know that if you want to get a lifelong nicotine user, you're much more likely to attract a lifelong user if they start when they're young. If you look at adult cigarette smokers, 90% of them began smoking before the age of 18. I think the number is around 95% that began smoking before the age of 21. There are some trends that are coming out that it seems like smoking and vaping initiation is moving a little bit later in life, and that's going to be something that's certainly going to be tracked closely over the next several years. Mental health in young people is certainly a major concern, a major issue. The data on mental health and vaping and nicotine is still evolving, but there is data showing that children with, you know, baseline poor mental health, higher rates of anxiety, depression, are more likely to use nicotine and specifically e-cigarettes. And there's also data that nicotine use leads to worse mental health. So when they track kids from year to year with who have been vaping, they can see that their mental health scores worsen from year to year. We also know that quitting vaping can improve some of these mental health symptoms. So the bottom line takeaway, which I don't think is controversial, is that young people should not be using any tobacco or nicotine product. This is one of my favorite slides because the timeline over the past year really has been pretty incredible. Um, E-cigarettes took over as the most popular tobacco device in 2014. Back then, we were using primitive e-cigarettes, first generation, cigalikes, and mods. Um, and then the e-cigarette world sort of changed forever in June of 2015 when Juul launched their e-cigarette. This was what's called a pod mod. That little black end at the tip contained a pre-filled pod that could be exchanged in and out of the e-cigarette. This was a brilliant design. It looked like a USB stick. It was small. It used a smaller battery. They revolutionized the e-juice by using something called a nicotine salt or a nic salt. They add benzoic acid to it, lowers the pH of it. It turns into an aerosol at a lower temperature, so you didn't need that big, huge battery. And it also reduced the throat hit with having a lower pH, so it didn't hurt as much when you inhaled, allowing the experience to be more satisfying. Juul did an incredible job advertising as well, which we'll talk a little bit about. The e-cigarette market sort of, hummed along for the next couple years. Juul did slowly become more popular. And then in 2018, the high schoolers report about 1 in 5 were vaping e-cigarettes. When you have a big jump, almost a doubling of vaping rates, you get the FDA's attention. Scott Gottlieb called youth vaping an epidemic in 2018, and they began investigations into brick and mortar sales, online sales, and specifically into Juul and some of their marketing practice. So the e-cigarette industry was on notice. But then in the fall of 2019, National Youth Tobacco Survey data came out again, and over a quarter of high school students reported using an e-cigarette in the past 30 days. I don't know if people remember life before the COVID pandemic, but in the fall of 2019, we were also in the middle of the EVALI outbreak. It was a mysterious lung illness, which was wasn't entirely clear what it was coming from, but young people were getting sick, some who were dying, many ending up in ICUs on ventilators. There were several that needed lung transplants. And it was this mysterious illness that all users or all individuals who were diagnosed with this reported a history of vaping. So there was a lot of concern around young people and vaping. It turned out that this was related to counterfeit THC vapes, but nevertheless, it had the nation's attention, and we were getting these high rates of youth use at the same time. That led the federal government to act, and they did two things in late 2019, early 2020. The first is that they banned the pre-filled flavored pods. So this was really a target at or legislation that targeted Juul. So any of the cigarette devices, and there were some knockoffs, any of them that came with a pre-filled flavored pod that you could just swap in and out, those were now illegal. So Juul had to switch to really just providing tobacco and menthol flavored pods. The challenge with this legislation is that it did two things. If you had a refillable vape device, so you just had bought a unit and you just had to refill the flavors or the liquid when it ran out, Those flavors were still legal, so there was no restriction on refillable flavors. And the other category it carved out was disposable e-cigarettes. So they said if disposable e-cigarettes are not banned from using any flavors. So e-cigarettes that were deemed disposable, single use that you used and then threw away, became much more popular after that. The other thing that happened in early 2020 is that Tobacco 21 went into effect, and this was federal legislation. So retailers were no longer allowed to sell to individuals under 21. This has been sort of something that's been a goal of the public health community for many years, to curb youth use. And we can see, and then, sorry, I don't want to forget the final big issue that happened right in this very short period of time was the COVID pandemic. And we saw a drop in rates of use. In 2021, only 11% reported. A lot of that was likely related to the social isolation of adolescents, limiting their sharing of vapes. We saw uptick in 2022, and people were concerned the rates were going to rise again, but they have shown a steady decline over the past 2 years. In 2021, nicotine pouches also became available and are slowly becoming more popular in youth. And then, as I talked about, these disposable vapes really sort of took over the market, because this was a way to keep flavors in e-cigarettes. Juul did take a big hit over the past couple of years. They have been sued by many states, fined billions of dollars in settlements that they're paying out to states over the next 5 years. And that brings us to today, where rates of e-cigarette use have continued to decline, and cigarettes are extremely unpopular in teens. There is a new device out there, these what we're calling smart vapes, and that's something we're going to talk about over the next several slides. If we look over the past couple of years at rates of high school use, I just want to highlight again this downtrend in e-cigarette use in adolescents. That's something to be celebrated. I find it amazing how low both cigarettes and cigar use are. I think this is great progress. And then I've got my eye on nicotine pouches. When I've done my informal babysitter polls, it seems like nicotine pouches are more popular than just 2.4% of high school students reporting their use. But we'll see, and this is going to be a close number to watch. So bottom line, takeaway number 2 is that youth e-cigarette use is on the decline, that pouch use is increasing, albeit slowly. So I want to change gears a little bit and just talk about what's the playbook to hook young people to tobacco devices. And this is a playbook that's been in place for decades. The playbook's certainly more complicated than this, but I have simplified it into 2 things. Really make tobacco products appealing, and number 2, make it easy to access. So when we look at the appeal, I think e-cigarettes really jumped up in their appeal with Juul. Not only was the device highly appealing, it had great flavors, it had a unique design, it had this minimization of the throat hit, but the advertising was also impressive. They hired young, beautiful models and put them all over their social media accounts. They took out advertising space in Times Square. They really made e-cigarettes look hip and cool and sexy at a time when cigarettes themselves had really been denormalized. You know, this is getting ready for Labor Day. You're going to go on a beach and sit in a hammock and you've got your Juul. That looks like the kind of place I would like to be on Labor Day. Sex always sells, so Juul had sort of taken that script from the traditional tobacco playbook. And then Juul also hired these online influencers. Christina Zayas is one of them, who was paid by Juul to sort of, put this on her social media accounts and really promote Juul. When we talk about making e-cigarettes appealing, certainly flavors are really appealing amongst youth. I know the Wisconsin Youth Tobacco Survey a couple years ago had a question about whether or not adolescents in Wisconsin would use unflavored e-cigarettes, and I think it was something like 92% said they wouldn't. So just about any flavor you can imagine, you can find online. So the other thing is make them easy to access. Um, in the early days of e-cigarettes, it was really easy to access them. The Tobacco 21 regulation wasn't in place yet. Online sales, there was really no restrictions. You clicked a button saying you were 18 back in the day, and they weren't doing any sort of age verification. And then retail stores were still, whether they were vape shops or gas stations, were selling to youth. And youth have been asked this question on numerous surveys. And these are really the four main sources where young people get their vapes. They're getting them from their friends, they're getting them from vape shops, they're getting them from retail stores, and they're getting them online. So let's get into the evolution of e-cigarette devices. As I mentioned, the early generation really tried to represent the traditional cigarette. That was the cig-alike. Blue was sort of the dominant brand back then. They had hired Jenny McCarthy to promote e-cigarettes. But then the e-cigarette industry said, bigger is better, and they developed vape pens, which had a much larger container for the e-juice, allowed you to vape for longer periods of time. And they also put larger batteries in those e-cigarette devices so you could get that coil heated up higher and get a bigger hit of nicotine. Mods are really vape pens on steroids. These aren't nearly as popular as they used to, but these you can get a huge hit of aerosolization of that e-liquid. Sometimes when you'd see that huge white cloud come out of a user's mouth, that was usually from a mod. Juul, as I mentioned, revolutionized the e-cigarette market with pod mods, these refillable flavored pods that just go in and out of the e-cigarette device. As the flavor ban took hold, Puff Bar really filled the space and filled it very quickly and very effectively. The Puff Bar is the exact same size as Juul. So this device looks, feels, tastes like a Juul. It was sort of a brilliant design and one that became extremely popular with young people. But because this is a disposable e-cigarette, it is legal to have flavors. A lot of knockoffs, a lot of major tobacco brands then started making disposable e-cigarettes. They knew flavors were appealing to users, so those became much more popular. And just like the early generations of e-cigarettes evolved, so did these disposable e-cigarettes. So now we've got larger e-cigarettes. These are still disposable. You cannot refill them. You cannot replace any cartridges. So this is a single-use e-cigarette. But these now, the BC 5000 down there has 5,000 hits on it. The Nexa 50,000 actually has 50,000 hits of it in a single device. So this is a device that you're going to carry around with you, I imagine, for weeks. And then you're going to throw the whole device away, including the battery, including all of that plastic, including all the hardware inside after you're finished using it. And then as all things evolve, these larger disposable e-cigarettes have now evolved to include devices with a screen. And again, what do teens love? This is a huge problem in society, but we know teens love screens. A couple of the major popular brands are the Geek Bar Pulse. This comes in both a 15,000 hit device and a 25,000 hit device. Again, these are disposable, so they can come in numerous flavors. The other one is the Raz DC 25,000. Same thing, has a screen on it, is disposable, and comes in various flavors. Again, these are rechargeable devices because you're likely to drain your battery, but they are not refillable. So again, this is a device you're going to use. You're going to get your 25,000 hits and then throw the device away. What's become a little bit more concerning in the public health world is that these are now gaining popularity in sales. So monitoring tobacco product use puts out this data. It's public. And we can see that Geek Bar Pulse cracked the top five, so did Raz. I went to one of our local vape shops yesterday and actually bought a Geek Bar Pulse. And I just want to pause my presentation. Um, and I think, can everyone see me at this point? Amy, can you see me?
Yes.
Great. So this is the Geek Bar Pulse. This flavor is California cherry. On the back, it says, "May the pulse be with you." This is the 15,000 hit Geek Bar Pulse. And here's the screen, and the screen is activated on the bottom. On the bottom of this device, there's this valve that is currently off, and then you can flip it to the regular. That's the inlet, so air comes in here, and then you inhale here, and I can tell you it smells really good. And then you can go to pulse mode, which basically increases the airflow. So you're going to get more vapor as you inhale. And that actually is going to cut it down to about 15,000 total hits. Now, here's the technology increase. When I turn this on, here's our screen. You can see it tells me my battery's at 98%, and it tells me I've got 100% of my juice left. I can tell you I haven't never used an e-cigarette, but you can see there's my 100, this is 100% full. Now, what gets really fancy is when I turn it to the pulse mode where I can get a bigger hit, a rocket ship turns on. And that is it. That's what the screen does. It's not interactive. There's nothing to touch. But it gives me a little bit of, I guess, some excitement as I turn it on and off. So that is the Geek Bar Pulse, one of the more popular e-cigarette devices now. I'm going to go back to share my screen. Amy, are you able to see my slide?
Yes.
Great. So smart vapes, I think this is a little bit of an uh-oh. I think we've got a problem here. There are now a ton of knockoff brands. Once something starts to sell, lots of other companies get into this space. So there's a lot of these sort of relatively simplistic screens that may show your percentage of vape juice left and your battery power and may give you some sort of graphic. I can see fingerprints and snowflakes and rockets and things like that. There's some ability to control your airflow and how much you're getting. Um, I think there's an extra uh-oh coming though. This is a device that is now available for sale online. And I just want to highlight some of the features that are advertised with this device. This now has Bluetooth connection, so you can connect this device to your phone. You can get notified when you've got calls or texts. There's an AI chat feature. There's ability to take to take photos, music player, calculator, time, weather, find your device, and there's some games on it. This contains 28 milliliters of e-juice. This Geek Bar Pulse is 16 milliliters, so that's probably a 40 to 45,000 hit e-cigarette, and it's got a rechargeable battery. And again, flavors are not outlawed in these as this is a disposable e-cigarette by definition. It's not refillable. But again, when you get to the end of that juice, you're throwing this device away. This is another one I found, the Craft Box V Play. This is a 20,000 hit disposable vape, and it's a video game that we're now vaping out of. So this is what I'm worried about is where the e-cigarette industry is going. And they're, goal to promote these devices to youth. So again, back to that very, very simplified playbook to hook, make it appealing. Given the state of youth's interest and interactions with screens, I think the tobacco industry has certainly done that. And then make it easy to access. And Tobacco 21 has certainly made it harder to access. Some enforcement has made it harder to access, but I would encourage you to Google buy smart vapes. There are some online sales restrictions that are in place over the past couple of years, but it is not difficult to get around them and still buy online vapes. So that then becomes to the question of, are these even legal? So I want to spend a couple slides talking about PMTA, the pre-market tobacco product applications. So in 2009, the tobacco world was evolved with the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act. Basically, they gave the FDA regulatory authority over tobacco products. They created the Center for Tobacco Products within the FDA. And they required that any new tobacco product that's going to be sold on the market has to be approved by the FDA. It took years for this to get sort of up to speed and going due to multiple delays. But in September of 2020, all new tobacco products, so existing tobacco products were grandfathered in, but all new tobacco products had to go through this PMTA authorization. And over 6 million applications were submitted in September of 2020, and the FDA had a year to review all applications, and applications continue to roll in. So the FDA considered the following criteria when approving a tobacco product for sale. It had to look at the benefits and risks of the product to the population as a whole. Had to look at current tobacco users. And really what I think they're saying there is current cigarette smokers. Are they more likely or less likely to stop using the current tobacco product based on the new product's availability? And then looking at people who don't use any tobacco product, specifically kids, would they be more likely or less likely to begin using tobacco products if that product is on the market? And then they also have the ability to look at the methods, the facilities, sort of the inner workings of those tobacco developers. And I want to be clear that PMTA approval does not mean these are FDA-approved cessation devices. They're not saying, yes, we'll approve this e-cigarette. It can be used for smoking cessation. That's a whole other process. This is just saying, can the product be sold in the US? Now I want to just show all the products that have been approved. So there's heated tobacco products. Marlboro has various heat sticks. They had some approved in 2019 and again in 2023. Moonlight, menthol, those are actually a low nicotine cigarette that were approved in 2019. And then Ecos, which is a heated tobacco product, also was approved in 2019. When we look at e-cigarette brands that have gotten approval, there's only 3. So Vuse, Enjoy, and Logic all have various e-cigarettes that have been approved through this process. Look at nicotine mints. Verve mints were approved in 2021. And nicotine pouches, you may have seen the headlines in January, but Zyn received this same approval. And I just want to be clear, that is it. Those are the only brands that have legal authority to be sold in the United States. I'll put the asterisk there that Juul did sue and has been granted a stay by a judge while the FDA continues to review their applications. Truth Initiative did a study looking at e-cigarettes on the market and found that 86% of e-cigarettes currently on the market are illegal. And this sort of picture, I think, summarizes the situation perfectly. I'm happy to announce that I am a flawed parent, and I walked in on this scene and I had to take a picture. You know, the child is getting crushed. Meanwhile, my dog is sitting there very innocently. Maybe that's the tobacco industry. And I don't know if she was trying to distract me with a bouquet of tulips in the background, but this whole situation of all these illegal products still being sold, just down the street from me. It just doesn't make sense. And I think enforcement is challenging, and I think we have a long, long way to go. So, bottom line, number three is that illegal smart vapes, I think, are starting to flood the market, and I do think we're going to see more of them in the years to come. It will be interesting to see how these impact rates of youth use. So, this is certainly a threat to those declining vaping rates. Now, I just want to turn into a couple slides on nicotine pouches. These are gaining popularity and really talk about what these are. So I don't know if people have seen these. I'm getting reports that these are showing up in urinals in high school bathrooms where kids are just spitting them out. So you're seeing them in parking lots, things like that. But basically what nicotine pouches are they are synthetic nicotine. So that is lab-derived nicotine. It doesn't come from the tobacco leaf. And basically, it's in this little, it's almost like a mesh cloth pouch that gets placed in your gums, and then the nicotine is slowly absorbed over the next 30-ish minutes. They come in a variety of flavors and a variety of strengths. Zyn, as I mentioned, is the only pouch maker that's authorized for sale in the US. They come in 3 milligram and 6 milligram pouches. You can find there are a lot of different pouch manufacturers on the market. I just want to highlight this White Fox does come in 18 milligram nicotine pouches, so certainly abilities to get addicted more easily. And again, I think when we look at nicotine pouches, comparing them certainly to cigarettes, but also to e-cigarettes, it's really nicotine that is the challenge with these. We're not seeing the same levels of carcinogens. We're not really seeing carcinogen that doesn't have tar like chewing tobacco. So it's really nicotine, and that's sort of the threat of these devices on teens and the impact nicotine can have on mental health. And then there are other consequences of nicotine as well. As I mentioned, Zyn is now authorized. And this is just something we're going to keep our eyes on over the next several years. Sales have increased. So again, I'm a little surprised with how much sales have increased. So we haven't seen the percentage increase in young people, but this could be more young adult and older adult use as well. So I think when we look at sort of the balance of tobacco in the public health world, there's always this question of youth initiation and addiction versus these newer tobacco products for adult smoking cessation and harm reduction, which is a hotly, hotly debated topic. Certainly, everyone is against combustible cigarettes. The health harms of combustible cigarettes are very, very clearly defined. E-cigarettes, there's a balance here. There's some studies that are increasing studies are showing the benefits of e-cigarettes and helping people quit smoking. There are issues with a lot of people who are traditional smokers, then just go on to be dual users and not fully switch to the traditional or the e-cigarette. And then there's obviously the concerns with youth initiation. And then there's the even less harmful products, things like Zyn, and where those fall in this spectrum is, I say, still being sorted out, but in my opinion, certainly feels like they carry less health risks than e-cigarettes. So a quick summary on adolescent tobacco use. Use is certainly dynamic. There's lots of things that affect teen use. I continue to have concerns with teen use. For any device, it's nicotine addiction and really those withdrawal symptoms. And then I am concerned about toxin exposure, both in the short and long-term use of e-cigarettes. So what can we do? How can we communicate with teens? I think there's, again, two major buckets. One is preventing initiation, and two, for people who are using, whether that's addiction or whether that's just experimentation, trying to help them quit those behaviors. So we all know teens are brilliant. So when we want answers, I think it's smart to go to teens. I've sort of summarized some qualitative and survey data. So when you ask teens why they haven't used e-cigarettes, the major themes that come up are one, health effects, two, fear of addiction, and three is cost. And I think this is some public health messaging has really been effective on the fears of both addiction and the health effects of e-cigarettes can resonate with teens. When we look at people that have adolescents that have used an e-cigarette, certainly social influences really consistently is sort of the gateway to use and to initiation. Oftentimes it's a friend offering an e-cigarette, and that peer pressure really can play a big role in initiation. And then teens talk about managing stress, anxiety, sort of the coolness, the flavors, and the tricks of e-cigarettes, as well as that sort of invincibility that teens have. And yeah, maybe they're harmful to some people, but it won't hurt me. When we look at why young people have quit e-cigarettes, again, it's really those similar to why they're not using in the first place. It's health concerns, it's addiction, and then it's difficulty accessing e-cigarettes, whether that's the ability to buy or whether it's the cost of the products. We did a study looking at adolescents in the state of Wisconsin. Again, reasons for initiation, friend use was by far and away number one. And then motivation for continued use was really those feelings of being anxious, stressed, or depressed. Whether that's unique mental health symptoms or whether that's actual dependence driving those feelings leading to more use is sort of unclear. When you look at helping teens quit e-cigarettes, the vast majority don't use anything. This is data from National Youth Tobacco Survey from, I think, the 2021 data. But most people are not doing anything or relying on their peers. No one's really using meds. And although there are a lot of apps out there, they're not being used all that frequently. The AAP has a tobacco treatment model that they have rolled out. It's the ACT model. It's really ask, counsel, and treat. There isn't great data on treating adolescents' e-cigarette use. There isn't great data on treating adolescents who smoke combustible cigarettes, but the AAP does have a guideline for using nicotine replacement therapy, basically using a validated dependence scoring system, whether that's hooked on nicotine or the e-dependence scale. And for young people who are moderately or severely addicted, the AAP does recommend or considering using nicotine replacement therapy. There is recent data that was published or presented at a conference a couple weeks ago that used a study looking at varenicline or Chantix to help young people quit vaping, and that did show some benefit, and we anticipate that will be out in print in the next couple weeks. So this is certainly a space that's evolving where we're going to have a lot more information over the next couple years. And I will turn it over to Amy Scora, our outreach specialist, to talk a little bit about some more services and resources available through UW-CTRI's outreach arm.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. Okay, so I will round things out and let's take a look at some treatment resources, and then we will cover what our CTRI outreach specialists can help you with in your organizations. So first, wanted to share information about the Wisconsin Tobacco Quit Line. Some of you may be familiar with the services of the Quit Line. This is a completely free, confidential service that provides tailored counseling and support for anyone in Wisconsin who is 13 years of age and older. The Quit Line can help address combustible cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, and vaping products, and also smokeless tobacco products as well. The Quit Line's available 24/7. There are many different ways to access the Quit Line. You can call in to 1-800-QUIT-NOW. There is a Spanish language line available. If you want to register by texting READY to 34191, that's an option. You can register on the Quit Line's website, and then there are also ways to directly refer patients to the quit line. And that's something that your regional outreach specialist can help you get set up if you're interested in that. Going over a couple of the services briefly, there are services for both youth and young adults, and then also adults who are 18 years of age and older. So for those that are 18 and up, they can receive coaching through a bunch of different modalities. So over the phone, you can text with a coach. There are live online chat features on their online platform. And then there are also some group counseling sessions that you can take place. There are some medications available through the Quit line, so completely free of cost. The NRT, either the nicotine patch, gum, or lozenge. Um, Individuals can receive a 2-week starter kit of those medications that can be mailed directly to them. Again, for those that are 18 and older. For youth and young adults, those that are 13 to 17 years of age, all of the services are completely digital, so doing things online. There's specific online content directed for youth. There's also the option to connect with coaches via the online chat. And then for those that want information about how to quit vaping, you can access Live Vape Free as a part of the Quitline services. That's a completely free texting program for teens. Lastly, wanted to mention a separate program through the Quitline specific for American Indian and Native American populations. So our American Indian program, there's a specific line to get connected with those services. And there are some enhanced services, increased calls and medications for this group, and also receiving some culturally tailored support. So we can go to next slide. Okay. For giving you a little bit more information about Live Vape Free, again, this is to address vaping and e-cigarette use. There are kind of two sectors here, a companion program for parents and educators, but then the cessation support for youth and young adults. So again, free program for those that are ages 13 to 26. And you can receive a lot of different types of support from trained quit coaches. There are many different options to either receive texts or do some get some support online on their website. An easy way to get connected would be to text Vape Free to 873373. You can see the website below. We do have a fact sheet on our website that has that QR code. That's really nice to be able to hand to patients that they can scan that code and easily get connected to the website and register. On the flip side, with the parents and educators, this is a program for parents, other trusted adults, advocates who want to support teens in quitting. So there is an advocate section on the Live Vape Free website that you can receive some helpful information about how to talk to teens about vaping, other tools that you can share with them, toolkits. So a lot of good information on Live Vape Free for both teens and advocates. Another resource to share with you is through the Truth Initiative. It's their X program. So this is formerly known as This Is Quitting, if you're familiar with that. It's now integrated into the X program. So this is in collaboration with Mayo Clinic and Truth Initiative. So science-backed interventions. Those that join the X program receive free texts and access to an online quit community, and they can address any nicotine product. So you can receive daily text messages and support, easily registering by texting X program to 88709, and also has a lot of effectiveness at promoting e-cigarette and dual use abstinence. So can address, again, any type of tobacco product, but definitely want to support those that are dual using as well. For the resource through smokefree.gov, there's specific resources for teens. So Smoke Free Teen, again, has that specific content for this age group, different online tools and resources to support someone in quitting. Smoke Free Text has a program specific to teens. So for 13 to 17-year-olds who are ready to quit smoking, they can text QUIT to 47848 and get registered to receive some motivational and supportive texts. There's also a smartphone app, so Quit Start. If somebody is interested in going that route, they have access to that app and can get support that way through smokefree.gov. Also wanted to just share a couple of additional resources, just wanting you to have as many options as possible to share with patients. Dr. Williams mentioned the American Academy of Pediatrics. So this is great to receive some guidance in treating nicotine use. So the aap.org has a lot of great information on there for providers. The Wisconsin Department of Health Services has their Tobacco is Changing campaign, so reliable source of information about, as we know, today's ever-changing array of tobacco and nicotine products. So to receive information there that can help parents and other adults have informed discussions with the teens and young people in their lives about how to quit and what those products are and how they're affecting their health. Tobacco Free Kids has different videos and resources for parents. And then the Real Cost campaign is an e-cigarette and cigarette prevention campaign that educates youth about the negative health effects of vaping and smoking. So a couple of additional resources if you want to check those out. And then lastly, I want to review our outreach program at the UW Center for Tobacco Research and Intervention and the support that we can provide you. This is a resource that brings evidence-based tobacco cessation treatment to all corners of Wisconsin. Our outreach specialists provide free training and technical assistance to help you integrate treatment for tobacco use and dependence. So we want you to be able to feel comfortable and confident providing counseling and treatment interventions with patients. Um, are aware of the Wisconsin Tobacco Quit Line services and how to refer patients, how to change treatment workflows so that we can best integrate treatment into your current workflows and current practices. So many different things that we can help you with, and also want to connect you with the latest resources. And all of the services for our outreach program are supported by Wisconsin DHS and the Commercial Tobacco Prevention and Control Program. So we're here to help and have completely free services that we can provide you if you're interested. Wanted to share contact information. This is also on our website, so we can share the direct link to each outreach specialist on our website in the chat. But we have the state broken up into regions, so you can see who your regional outreach specialist is. And again, feel free to contact us. We're happy to help you as you need. And then just wanting to share our website once more, ctri.wisc.edu. So tons of different information for providers. We do have a page specific to youth, keeping that up to date and current as we can, and vaping as well. But lots of different types of materials. Again, our archived webinars are on there, different fact sheets, resources, and research. So feel free to check that out in depth as well. And with that, we do have a couple minutes for questions. So we've been monitoring the chat. And I will say, Brian, if you want to stop sharing.
Brian, there was a question for you. I see Jesse gave a range for how much Geek Bars costs, but how much was the device that you purchased?
Yeah, this was $25 yesterday, and that looks consistent with the online pricing.
Great. And then I do see a question from Pamela. I know there is a higher incidence of tobacco use in rural areas. Is there a higher incidence of vaping in teens in rural areas as well?
I don't know the answer to that question. I will look that up. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that is a great question.
Yeah.
We can follow up on that, Pamela.
Then I see, what is the most common country of origin for vapes, disposable e-cigarettes? It's China. This is made in China. There are a lot of vapes that are these illegal vapes that are manufactured in China. The smart one that had, the phone connectivity, the games, all that, I really tried to figure out where that website was coming from, and it looked like It was out of Michigan, but even that was unclear. There's another link to Mundelein, Illinois. So I think there's some online websites being set up here in the States, but they're, getting all their product made and sent over from China. So
Okay. We did have another question in general, more for CTRI outreach. Does CTRI reach out to healthcare providers with this information? Curious how this education can or does get to providers. So that is kind of the goal of our CTRI outreach program, is to share the research, share best practices with healthcare providers. We do a lot of proactive outreach, but have built up, many different relationships with basically all health systems in Wisconsin, to be able to get connected with providers and share this education and research with them. But we can always do more work in trying to get the word out. And we have email listservs and our website that's highly accessed. But a lot of the work that we do is just from those connections that we've built over the years, getting that again that the research and the education out there to providers so they can best help their patients.
I see a question. Does earlier onset vape use correlate with other substance abuse issues later on? I'd say the simple answer is yes. Part of the concern with adolescent nicotine use is that it can set up some of these reward circuits in the brain. So then when you're exposed to another addictive substance later in life, it's easier to get addicted because the brain's already done that. I get this addictive chemical, I get my dopamine hit, I feed back, and I feel pleasurable and euphoria. So that exists. There's certainly some overlap. Children or adults with who are experimenting with one substance are more likely to experiment with another. So whether those correlates are cause and effect is probably unlikely in some situations, that kids who are willing to experiment with one thing are likely willing to experiment with another, but certainly their biology can change due to vaping and just setting up those positive reinforcement pathways. Who is responsible for enforcement / removal of illegal tobacco products from the market? I am not a legal expert. I know the FDA does have an enforcement arm. I'm not sure if, Madison, Dane County Public Health does some brick and mortar sales where they'll send minors in. But Chris is saying, yes, it does look like it's the feds.
Okay, well, I see we're up on time here, but I appreciate all the discussion, all the questions. If there are any questions that we need to follow up on, we will do that. Um, I, I do want to give a big thank you to Dr. Williams for presenting and sharing all of his knowledge and insights into this very important topic with us. And thank you, Brian, for all the work that you do to help prevent and treat nicotine use among adolescents. A reminder to all attendees that you will receive the follow-up email after the webinar ends. That'll include that direct link to the recording of today's presentation. You can also find that on our website in our archived webinars section. And then a reminder as well that we will send out the survey. So when you close out, you should get a pop-up with our survey. It should take you a minute to complete. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that when our webinar ends as well. And with that, I will say thank you all for attending today's webinar. We hope to connect with you all soon, and we are always here to assist with any tobacco treatment needs that you may have. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.